The following is a Hoop Ball presentation.
Yo. Hey, hi, hello, and welcome to another edition of NBA Today, a hoop ball presentation. I'm your host, Corbin Ford. You can follow me at Corbin NBA. What is happening, y'all? It has been entirely too long. Yet another week without NBA basketball. I'm sure we've all been doing our best to maintain the social distancing, keep our hands clean, keep ourselves clean. and, while it's been good for the overall community of our fellow people, it has been horrible in terms of NBA basketball watching fans, as we have just been left in the lurch. It feels like, but news is on the horizon, and I'm excited to break that down here for you. I also have a little feature I'd like to share, a little Corbin flashback, a little piece of history happened a couple years back. I want to kind of shed some light on for you fine folks. But first, I do have to share. Please make sure you are following Hoopball, hoop-ball.com at hoopballtweets. Great content there. The Fantasy NBA show, I've still seen episodes go strong. There is still content to be had. And if and when NBA does return, that will be a welcome resource for you to use. So do not hesitate. Do not delay. Make sure to check out Hoopball. There are fine people on that side. Hoop-ball.com and at at hoopball tweets. All right. Also, talk about my podcast. Talk about the many great podcasts that are on Hoopball. Definitely make sure to check out a proud partner of all Hoopball podcasts, mybookie.ag. Use promo code today when signing up to get a 50% deposit match. Again, mybookie.ag. Don't think just because there are no active sports like football, baseball, basketball, that there aren't things such as, online betting or like virtual casinos. You still have the Nathan's hot dog eating contest. They are going to find themselves a way to have that hot dog eating contest. All right, that's going to happen. There's all sorts of things that can be bet virtually, even down to game shows and such. So just keep your eyes open. Be inventive there and use mybookie.ag for all of that great inventiveness. All right. Like I said, promo code today, as in this show, NBA Today, when signing up to get that 50% deposit match. Again, mybookie.ag. You bet, you win, you get paid. All right, so we have some news, sort of, not really, kind of, entirely. As we all know, places or different states are starting to open back up or make arrangements to, I don't want to say continue life as before, because that we are no way, shape, or form close to, but just to get businesses operating and starting back up. Being that the NBA is a business, Adam Silver and players, commissioners, league associates have been talking and trying to come up with ideas on what to do for the season, whether you continue the season, whether the season is canceled, if it does continue, where at, what is the idea for it, moves, just basic plans to kind of continue to develop, just business as usual, if and when the a situation arises that can be done. So, um, Adam Silver held a conference call with players this Friday. I'm recording this on Friday, May the 8th. This is the first episode in a couple of episodes that I've actually dated myself here, but this is when I'm recording it. And on that conference call, they addressed a wide range of topics regarding, the possible completion of this season amid obviously the COVID-19 panic. And although there were many issues that were discussed, Silver did stress that no plans will be implemented anytime soon, and that the league could possibly wait until June to make those decisions as they weigh their options. One big option that was actually started first by Keith Smith for Yahoo Sports was basically having a bubble plan, having all the remaining games in one city, like Orlando or Las Vegas. Keith Smith particularly mentioned Disney World, if I'm remembering that correctly. And for the most part, that seems to be the most logical decision moving forward. However, MBPA Executive Director Michelle Roberts did tell ESPN that players have expressed concerns about being isolated from their families under strict quarantine for months at a time, and that is true. The playoffs are a grind, even without the travel. That's many days away from family, and to be isolated in that type of environment can be very stressful. We have to remember that. Obviously, it's a game, and where players are playing, but they're people, with families, and being away that long is a lot. However, it does make sense, the bubble plan that is, because it eliminates any sort of significant travel, which obviously lowers the risk of spreading the virus, but it also makes it so you can play more games in a shorter amount of time. So you're not stretching out the playoffs like it usually is, a 2 month grind. It can be a little more condensed. So many are wondering whether that meant the playoffs would have to be truncated to a 3 or 5 game series, but Silver said in the conference call he still hopes that the postseason, if and when it does return, will include a full 7 game series for every round. This is according to Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN. That would make resuming the season in a single site a lot more feasible. And the tweet from at Adrian Wojnarowski, I quote, sources, Silver told players that he's still hopeful that the playoffs would include a 7 game series in every round. He told players that this series could move faster without the need for travel, staying in a single site. Orlando and Vegas still tops. End quote. So the NBA has not decided whether the league will try to complete this or move directly to the playoffs, but Silver did acknowledge that, it might just be the end of the regular season. You might have to go straight to the playoffs and have the top 8 teams as it stands right now on both the Eastern and Western conferences just be moved and start the season from there if and when that does return. That would be a problem for teams like the Trailblazers, the Pelicans, the Spurs, and the Kings because guess what? They were on the bubble, but they're probably not going to get a chance to make that up if the season resumes. So there is no late push for that final spot. And Silver quoted saying that there would be a series of bad options to determine how to proceed. But long story short, as a Spurs fan, if you are one, I'm not saying I am, but that 21 or 22 consecutive playoff years might come to an end. Very likely if the season does return. Obviously, that is so far under the scale of importance, but I'm just bringing it up because basketball, it's NBA today. I have to cover it. And that was another tweet quoted from Chris Haynes. Adam Silver acknowledged there would be a series of bad options to decide on pertaining to teams on bubble of making playoffs. He couldn't guarantee those teams would have a chance to earn a playoff berth if hiatus extends too far out. There we go. So that's the thing. Because you also have to remember that, and this is just what it is. You're planning for this season and what's going to happen here, but you're also looking forward to next season as well. And as the time gap gets closer and closer between one and the other, obviously you're going to push one back. That seems to be the prevailing thought right now. Or are you going to, set a certain time? How are you going to address the 2020-2021 season? So it just makes a lot more sense to not have all these games be played back in and not have great basketball as is because many players don't have reasonable places to work out right now, any hoops to shoot on right now. So you have to deal with all those other optics as well to then say, oh, by the way, you're in the middle of the playoff race, carry on, and then take that time and then do the playoffs. It's just a lot. It's just a lot. So that's probably not going to be something that those teams will have, and that's unfortunate, but obviously there's so much more going on right now that is a lot more important, a lot more scary during these times. So that's the news update for the NBA. They're obviously still hoping for it. We will see. There's a lot going on. There's teams that have already been allowed to test asymptomatic players and staff for the coronavirus. And this is in municipalities where coronavirus testing has become readily available to at-risk healthcare workers. So those NBA teams that are opening facilities for voluntary workouts will be allowed to administer tests to asymptomatic players and staff, and that was sources told to ESPN. So the Orlando Magic have been approved, and they plan on doing it, and the Clippers and Lakers are also among the teams expected to be allowed to conduct those coronavirus tests of all players and staff members entering facilities for those individual workouts, and that's regardless of whether or not they're experiencing symptoms. So that's at least a start for teams getting back in there. Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti that recently said that testing is available for all residents and not just frontline and at-risk healthcare workers, and that's important because it would just not leave a good taste in anyone's mouth to have entertainment, NBA, players and other people just getting that priority access when you have people working the front lines and others who are at risk who are not having that readily available access to that testing, and that is important. And so it is good that they are saying that this testing is available for all, and that is not something that's going to be like a pick your who's more important type situation. It's not the right wording, but that's where I'm kind of at right now. The NBA recently informed teams of a limited exception to guidelines that forbid the testing of asymptomatic individuals in this preliminary phase. So essentially, the NBA will approve a written authorization from a local health authority that confirms that there's been a very thorough testing in place for at-risk healthcare workers. So that is important. There are some teams that have opened up facilities this Friday that have not had testing options in place. That includes the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Portland Trailblazers. They're among the teams planning to participate in the Mayo Clinic Coronavirus Antibody Study, which is an NBA and National Basketball Players Association partnership that will provide confidential test results to players within 2 days of the clinic receiving samples. So, you know, again, they're trying to make sure that the players are looked out for if the season is to continue. But NBA Commissioner Adam Silver has said there needs to be widespread testing available in the United States before the league could consider a resumption of play this season. And that is important to think about because if this is all over before the NBA even considers it, we could be looking at a much longer time period than we already have in place right now. Also, something that Silver mentioned that I thought was interesting is that they're trying to wonder or trying to kind of muddle out if a player does show symptoms, if they can just quarantine that player and continue the league and not have a situation where they start the league again, someone gets sick again, or someone, has the misfortune of contracting this virus and then they have to close everything down all over again. They're trying to mitigate that from happening. And so that is something that they are definitely monitoring and also has come into consideration. So ultimately, I don't think this is something that happens anytime soon. I think you definitely look past all of May for certain. I think you actually look past June. And I think it happens closer to July, if I had to venture to guess. Personally, I know it's not a popular decision, but I just think it doesn't make sense to continue the season as it is. There's too much going on. I don't think that the risk is worth the possible reward. You're already not having fans at the arenas. That's just without question, just full stop, not going to have fans there. And not that that's an end all be all, but I'm saying if that is such an important, uh, not even distinction or barometer, but that is something that's an element of, the playoffs in basketball as is. You have players who could possibly be away from their families for months at a time. You have so much logistics and measuring out and just covering bases and covering your own butts as far as the NBA and players and coaching staff and associates. It just seems like a lot of work for little payoff. Like, yes, I'm sure you don't want the NBA season to end in an asterisk. I'm sure there's teams that have older players that want to continue to play for the year and to finish strong. I'm sure there was a lot of money to be made and or lost with the determination of this decision here, whether or not the season goes on. There's a lot taken into consideration. And yes, it's probably easy for me to say because I'm not the one that has to deal, with the ramifications. But just from a fan's perspective and someone who's just looking at it from the outside in saying, this just doesn't seem to be worth all of the potential mistakes that can come out of this. There's just more that can go wrong than can go right. And, I'm not alone. CJ McCollum, Mark Cuban, they both question the notion of return to the NBA. McCollum, in an interview for Yahoo Sports or with Yahoo Sports, expressed confidence in the steps the Blazers have taken, but said he wasn't sure the efforts were warranted. Basically said, I'm worried like the rest of the world, but I like that it is optional, and I'm pleased with the caution, structure, and measures that the Blazers organization has put in place to ensure the safest environment possible for all parties involved. I get the measures the league is taking, but you have to think at some point when there are drastic measures that need to be taken, is it really worth it? It's either safe or it's not. Cuban spoke on ESPN Radio's Freddie and Fitzsimmons, and he framed the issue in terms of whom players, coaches, and trainers trust with their lives. Seriously, if you're a player, who do you trust with your life? Cuban said. If you're a coach or a trainer or anybody for that matter, that's essential personnel for getting something back together. Do you trust the hotel that we're going to stay at to keep everything safe? The technology they're using? The protocols they're using? Who do you trust with your life? He repeated. That's a big question to ask somebody, but we all make decisions like that every day. Do you stay in? Do you go out? What do you do? Where do you go for your groceries? All these things, how do you do it? And then McCollum also downplayed the urgency of players needing to get back to the gym. He said, let's just be honest, man. It's not like it'll be the first time players got gym access outside of the team's facilities. Some people have been working out, if we're being honest. So, you have that as well. And all of this just makes for one complicated situation, as this entire time is. I mean, just in general, not even from a basketball-centric scope. There is a lot going on, a lot of different pieces, a lot of concerns, a lot of worries, a lot of things that have to be taken into account. That it is what it is there. And, from an NBA, putting my NBA glasses back on, that is something that has to be considered from all angles to ensure the safety of the players, of the coaches, of the personnel, of the fans, of everyone. And, we hope that a good decision will come soon for all of that. All right, so I do have a little, like I said, piece of history, little thing I like to share. This is May the 8th. And, on in this month, I was going to say on this day, but that's not true. In this month, uh, 7 years and 6 days ago, on May 2nd, 2013, the Minnesota Timberwolves decided not to exercise their option on the contract of executive David Kahn. Now, you may be wondering, who is David Kahn? What's going on? Who is he? Like, why do I care? What does that matter, right? Right? I get it. I understand. Well, guess what? Uh, 3 years ago, your boy wrote a very detailed piece on David Kahn, why you should know about him. And, it's an analysis of one of the worst general managers in NBA history. And, I just figured the time is ripe, maybe a couple days ago, to kind of be timely on the exact date. 7 years ago would have been better, but I do what I can. This NBA today, today being when I record, and we all just trying to make it out here together. So cut me some slack, y'all. But I'm gonna share this piece here with y'all, okay? And we're gonna break down David Kahn and why you should know about him and what he did, and it's gonna be pretty extensive. So let's get down to it. All right, so incompetent general managers are as common in the NBA as three-point plays. Just they're all over. Wes Unseld, Isaiah Thomas, Billy King. These are infamous GMs from the past who've just made horrific mistakes and ran their franchises into the ground at various points in their career. Doc Rivers, Jim Paxson, Gar Forman, Phil Jackson. We've also, known of these more recent examples of upper mismanagement that easily come to mind. However, there is one front office executive who was and remains a very interesting personality. His work leaves questions even now, and the depths he sank the franchise to at the time that he worked for were not normally seen in NBA history. His name, you guessed it, is David Kahn. David Kahn was general manager of the Minnesota Timberwolves from May 2009 through May 2013. You gotta love that congruency. Kahn was a relative unknown outside of those in NBA circles prior to his ascent to the front office. Just before being hired for Minnesota, he worked as a sports writer. He worked with NBC Sports as a consultant. He was an associate at a law firm. He worked as an associate GM for the Indiana Pacers. He worked with the MLB. He worked with the NBDL, NBA Developmental League, NBA G League. He did all of this. Jack of all trades, not really a master of anything. But despite this general lack of NBA executive experience, Timberwolves owner Glenn Taylor welcomed him with open arms. And to be fair, Kahn said the right things to begin with. Trying to build a championship contender, trying to make healthy habits, trying to take a young team and build them up with the pieces needed to succeed, But everything went downhill from there. During Kahn's tenure, Minnesota finished a combined 89 wins to 223 losses. That is a 28 win percentage. That is a league worst. He was known for the grief he caused with repeated short-sighted and misguided moves, and his work, especially in retrospective, is even more painful. So what I'm going to do right now is break down, or attempt to, give you a comprehensive breakdown of all of the personnel moves that Kahn made with the gift of hindsight. Each move of Kahn's will be broken down year by year, and we're going to highlight particularly egregious decisions here. So the first egregious decision was May 2009, when David Kahn was hired by the Minnesota Timberwolves. So Kahn's first move was to trade Randy Foye and Mike Miller to the Washington Wizards in exchange for Alexei Perkarov, Darius Gonzalez, Ian Thomas, and a 2009 first-round pick. Now, this was a very good move in retrospect. Kahn traded two decent rotation players in exchange for three expiring contracts and a high, fifth overall, first rounder. The move left Minnesota with increased flexibility and a very good asset, if nothing else. During the 2009 draft, Kahn selected Ricky Rubio 5th, Johnny Flynn 6th, Ty Lawson 18th, Wayne Ellington 28th, Nick Calathis 45th, and Hank Norrell 47th. Whew! Kahn entered the 2009 NBA draft with a whopping 4 first-round picks, 2 in the top 10. Blake Griffin was a definite first overall pick, followed by Hasheem Thabeet, that was questionable, then James Harden, then Tyreke Evans. There was still a lot of talent on the board where the Timberwolves went to pick with the 5th selection. You had guards Ricky Rubio, a guy named Stephen Curry, Johnny Flynn, and Brandon Jennings, who were all available. You also had a guard by the name of DeMar DeRozan, as well as big man Jordan Hill. So, needing a point guard, Kahn selected Ricky Rubio with the 5th pick. Now, this was a solid pick, as Rubio was highly intriguing with his electrifying playmaking, and you know the pizzazz that he came with into the NBA. However, there were question marks with Rubio over his lack of a consistent jump shot, as well as his contractual obligations overseas. Because of the potential complications of getting Rubio over right away, the Timberwolves drafted point guard Johnny Flynn sixth, right after Rubio. The Golden State Warriors selected Steph Curry just one pick later. This was a slightly more confusing selection, because when Kahn was up to pick, when he picked Flynn, Curry was still on board, and while there were questions surrounding whether or not he was a point guard or a shooting guard, there was no question that Curry could shoot the ball. That was not the case with Flynn, as he not only lacked a consistent jumper, but he was also a shaky fit alongside Rubio. Neither could play off ball, and that would be a problem if the two ever shared the floor together. So Kahn followed that pick with the 18th, which was Ty Lawson, possibly the best point guard in the 2009 draft at the time. However, Kahn had already agreed to send Lawson to Denver for a future first rounder. More on that later. This was interesting because at the time, Denver was a perennial playoff team with no indication that they would ever convey anything more than a middling first rounder to Minnesota. It's not like anyone saw them tanking anytime in the near future. This wasn't the process 76ers, if I'm being frank. Even after all that, Kahn still had the 20th pick, which he used on Wayne Ellington, who was a sweet shooter who Kahn imagined would give the Wolves some wing depth. The two second round picks that were used were on Nick Calathis, a combo guard, and Hank Norrell, a little known big man. Calathis only played 2 years in the NBA, none with Minnesota, while Norrell never spent a minute in the league. Alright, so the following I'm about to just ramble off here are some minor trades that Kahn made, mostly to free up extra cap space as well as to just acquire aspiring contracts. Basically, what I would do in NBA 2K My GM mode. Alright, so he traded Mark Madsen, Craig Smith, and Sebastian Telfair to the Los Angeles Clippers for Quentin Richardson. Then he traded Etan Thomas, a 2010 second round pick, which was Dexter Pittman, and an additional 2010 second round pick, who would become Magnum Roll, to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Chucky Atkins and Damian Wilkins. Shortly after acquiring Quentin Richardson, Minnesota traded him to the Miami Heat for center Mark Blount. Then Minnesota traded Bobby Brown and Darius Sungila to the New Orleans Hornets for Antonio Daniels. So now the following are free agent signings that Kahn made in 2009. So he signed Ryan Hollins, Ramon Sessions, Sasha Pavlicic, Jason Hart, Alonzo G, and Devin Green. Hart was later traded to the Phoenix Suns for Orlando Tucker, cash, and a 2010 second round pick. Hamidi Nya was selected. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Devin Green and Orlando Tucker alongside Alonzo G were later waived. Kahn also traded a second rounder to Dallas for Nathan Jawai, a rarely used big man that Kahn would send to the D League for Sioux Falls off and on over the next year. Dallas did not receive the second rounder because it was top 55 protected. And that will conclude all the transactions of 2009. We got 3 more years, y'all. Stay with me. So 2010. Kahn's first trade of 2010 was to send Brian Cardinal to the New York Knicks for Darko Milicic and cash. More on this one later. They later re-signed Cardinal after he was waived by the Knicks. Kahn also signed Greg Stiesma. This was his last personnel move before the draft. So, first year under David Kahn, Minnesota Timberwolves played horribly. They finished the 2009-2010 season with 15 wins to 67 losses. Kahn sought a faster, more free-flowing offense than what was in place when he arrived, but unfortunately due to injury and poor personnel fit, he did not get his desired result. The Timberwolves finished 20th of 30 in points per game at 98.2, and they couldn't stop anyone on the other end, giving up 107.8 points per game, good for second to last in the league. With the high projected pick heading to the 2010 draft, David Kahn was in a position to start to make things right. The Timberwolves were armed with 5 draft picks in 2010, 3 in the first round and 1 in the top 5. The 2010 draft loomed with talent, the likes of John Wall, Derek Favors, and DeMarcus Cousins. There was also intriguing talent in Evan Turner, Greg Monroe, and Al-Farouq Aminu. Paul George and Gordon Hayward were also in the top 10. However, Kahn decided to go in a completely different direction and selected Wesley Johnson, the high-flying shooting guard from Syracuse, with the 4th overall pick. Johnson was known for his athleticism, and he had solid long-range shooting ability. He averaged 16.5 points per game on 50% shooting, 41% from three-point range during his final season at Syracuse. However, he was already 23, had very shaky ball handling and passing skills, and offered little in the way of development. In addition, the troubled but immensely talented DeMarcus Cousins was selected just 1 pick after, a fact that seems even more glaring in hindsight. Then with the 16th pick from Denver, in the Ty Lawson trade the year before, Kahn selected Luke Babbitt. Shortly thereafter, he packaged Babbitt and Ryan Gomes and traded them to Portland for Martell Webster. Webster was a decent wing, but was just coming off a back injury that would hinder his play for years to come, and that transaction would cause contentious relations between Kahn and Portland for the rest of his tenure. Kahn selected Trevor Booker with the 23rd pick, Paulo Prestes with the 45th pick, and Hamidi Nya with the 56th pick. He then traded Booker and Ya to the Washington Wizards for Lazar Hayward, who Washington picked 30th, and Nemanja Bjelica. Hayward didn't last past his rookie contract. Presti's never played in the NBA, and Bjelica didn't join Minnesota until well after Kahn was gone. Kahn made two notable signings in the early days of free agency. The first was Nikola Pekovic, who was signed to a 4-year, $13 million deal. Then he followed that with extending Darko an offer that he could not refuse, a 4-year, $20 million deal with a partial guarantee on that fourth year. The signing was met with almost universal ridicule the minute the ink was dried, and Kahn would spend the rest of the offseason defending him, even going so far as to loosely compare Darko to Chris Webber in a marvel of an interview that you just have to check out on YouTube. It is particularly cringeworthy. Also, I will try to have the link available, but if you're looking for the most cringeworthy interaction between Kahn and Webber, check out 3 minutes and 35 seconds into the video. I'll have the link. It is very awkward. So, these were Kahn's words in the wake of his dismissal on Darko and what he did to receive such a contract. So, I'm going to quote here. Darko. We played Darko. Kurt Rambis and Dave Wool both were big proponents of making the trade. And once we obtained Darko, I could see what they were talking about. Darko has enormous skills. Both Kurt and Bill Laimbeer played the big man position in the league, and they felt that if he ever worked out for him psychologically, he could be one of the top 3 or 4 centers in the league. And again, the risk point was quite low when we made the trade, and even the contract we gave him, that many people talked about, was really no more than a backup center gets in our league these days, about $4 million a year. We didn't pay him as a starting center, even though we had him ticketed as our starting center. So I think that there were some reasons to do it, and I recognize those reasons even today. One of the things I wish we'd done a better job of there was, I only learned after he left, I think there was some family pressures. He had so many visitors, so many family members here at times, that there was a lot of pressure and stress in his life that maybe would have been a lot to overcome. End quote. On July 12th of 2010, Kahn made a move that could be deemed actually kind of smart, signing a 2012 second-round pick. Bojan Bogdanovic was selected, as well as a 2014 second-rounder. Markel Brown was selected, along with cash, to Miami in exchange for the talented but interesting Michael Beasley. Be easy, Michael Beasley was a former second-round pick in 2008 out of Kansas. He had an amazing college career, but had been rather underwhelming since then in the NBA, particularly struggling to be a second option to Dwayne Wade. Even so, he had just come off of a season where he averaged 17.9 points and 7 rebounds a night. The Heat had just acquired LeBron James and Chris Bosh, and they were in the process of shedding salary to make that happen. Kahn saw the opportunity to gain a young prospect in Beasley, who was 21 at the time, at a low price point while operating just under the salary cap. I think it's a decent move. Did Beasley fulfill his promise? Obviously not. But at the time, one could look at that and go, okay, young, talented asset for a low price of a couple of future picks, and second rounders at that, and some cash? Sure, why not? Kahn then followed that trade with another, just a day later. Basically sending Al Jefferson to Utah for Kosta Koufis, a 2011 first-round pick, Donatas Montejunas was selected, and a 2012 first-rounder, where Terrence Jones was selected. Kahn wanted the Wolves to be even more exciting with a more spread offense, and he didn't like the awkward and cramped fit between Jefferson and young big man Kevin Love. This was before Love had developed a reliable shot from 3, so neither could really space the floor. And the move both shed salary as well as attained draft picks that he would inevitably flip, but more on that later. In late July, Kahn signed Luke Ridenour, a dependable backup point guard, to a 4-year, $16 million deal. That season, he would shoot a career-high 44% from three-point range. Kahn later traded Ryan Hollins, Ramon Sessions, and a 2013 second-round pick, Jeff Whitty was selected, to the Cleveland Cavaliers in exchange for Sebastian Telfair, who Kahn had traded just last year, and Delonte West. West was immediately waived. Right, so the following are remaining free agent signings that Kahn made in 2010. He signed Anthony Tolliver, Sundiata Gaines, Maurice Ager, and Jason Hart. Ager, Gaines, and Hart were later waived. Right, 2011. We are midway through here, y'all. The Timberwolves' first major transaction of 2011 was massive, as they were one of the 3 teams involved in the mega Carmelo Anthony trade to New York. There were a lot of moving pieces in that deal, but for their part, the Wolves traded Corey Brewer to the Knicks and Kosta Koufis to the Nuggets. The Nuggets sent a 2015 second-round pick to Minnesota, Rashawn Holmes was selected, and the Knicks sent Eddie Curry, Anthony Randolph, and cash to the Wolves. Curry was immediately waived. The Timberwolves finished the 2010-2011 season with only a very small improvement, going from 15-67 to 17-65. They did pick up the pace, finishing among the tops in the league. They also finished 10th in points per game at 101.1, but again couldn't stop anybody, giving up 107.7 points a night, finishing dead last in the league. Kahn gave a State of the Wolves address toward the end of the season, which is kind of hilarious to look back in retrospect. Also, he gave a hilarious note where he basically was questioned about how he feel he did with the team, and he basically said, "Show of hands," asking the audience, asking the reporters to give him a sign of support for how they must surely feel that he did a good job with the team. And mind you, he didn't get a lot of hands in it, but it was hilarious. Check it out too. Another great David Kahn gem event interview. It just again seemed to illustrate the view that Kahn saw that the rest of us just couldn't make out. Just such a sunny disposition that, for some reason, we were blinded to apparently. All right, so now we move on to the 2011 NBA draft. Now, the 2011 NBA draft possessed a respectable class of talent, with players such as Kyrie Irving, Derek Williams, Brandon Knight, Kemba Walker, and the immortal Jimmer Fredette among the ranks. The Timberwolves held the second pick in the draft, and Kahn was enamored with Derek Williams from Arizona. Williams, at 6'8" and 241 pounds, was an athletic specimen who could jump out of the gym. He rose to national attention his sophomore season as he averaged 19.5 points and 8.3 rebounds while claiming second team All America accolades. Kahn felt that Williams could be an exhilarating front court talent that would add more youth and athleticism to a decent assemblage in place in Minnesota. Unfortunately, the front court for Minnesota was already packed with Kevin Love at power forward and Michael Beasley at small forward, and he too could move up a position. Williams was more comfortable playing power forward and would be miscast at the three with his specific skill set. Regardless, Kahn remained undaunted and selected Williams, who had only averaged 10 points and 5 rebounds in 3 seasons with Minnesota. In retrospect, Kahn could have given a closer look at Klay Thompson, Kawhi Leonard, or even one of the Kansas Twins in Markieff or Marcus Morris. But no, Derek Williams, which, I mean, in 2011, I was pretty high on Derek Williams too. I also had not followed the NBA nearly as close as I would hope David Kahn did, just scouting and everything. But, who cares about those such little details there, right? With the 20th pick, one Minnesota acquired in the Al Jefferson trade, Minnesota selected DeMontis Montejunas and then immediately moved him, along with Johnny Flynn and a 2012 second-round pick, who later became Will Barton, to the Houston Rockets for Brad Miller, Nikola Mirotic, Chandler Parsons, and the 2013 first-rounder, who would later become Andre Roberson. So this move, this jettisoning of Johnny Flynn, would bring an end to Flynn's Minnesota career and hasten the end of his NBA career. Flynn averaged an underwhelming 10.2 points and 4 assists per game while dealing with a string of injuries, mostly to his hip. His PER was a low 11.3, while his VORP was a minus 2.3 during his time in Minnesota. He would be out of the NBA by 2013. Kahn was not done wheeling and dealing, though. He immediately traded Nikola Mirotic to the Chicago Bulls for Norris Cole, Malcolm Lee, and cash. Right after that, he traded Norris Cole to the Miami Heat for Bojan Bogdanovic. He then traded Bogdanovic to the New Jersey Nets for cash and a 2013 second-round draft pick who would become Malcolm Lee. He closed out his draft trading frenzy by sending Chandler Parsons to the Houston Rockets for cash. Now, these moves were already confusing at the time, but have become more confounding as time has gone on, particularly for this reason. It is not known whether this is a mandate from the front office, although it could be assumed as such, but Kahn made all these moves to cut costs and free up enough money to buy out embattled coach Kurt Rambis from his contract. This follows a common theme in many of Kahn's transactions, ridding himself of talent to cut cost. In the coming years, Cole, Mirotic, Bogdanovic, and Parsons would have relatively productive seasons in their careers that would have certainly helped Minnesota. Instead, Kahn received a lone second-round pick for those four, as well as a couple $1 million to pay a coach to go away. Shortly after the draft, Kahn traded a 2015 second-round pick, who would become the previously mentioned Rashawn Holmes, to the Portland Trailblazers for the pick that was Tanguy Ngumbo. However, it became apparent that Kahn did not do his due diligence in scouting, as it was discovered that Ngumbo was ineligible to be drafted due to being 26 years old. Now we're going to go to something slightly more positive. How much of a hand in this is unknown, but Kahn should be given some credit in making a solid coaching hire with the hire of Rick Adelman on September 12th. Adelman was a very successful coaching legend with a number of teams, most notably in Portland, Sacramento, and Houston, and would have relative success in Minnesota in spite of Kahn's efforts. Kahn made one final trade in 2011, sending Lazar Hayward, who only played 42 games with the Wolves, to the Oklahoma City Thunder in exchange for Robert Vaden, a 2012 second-round pick, Robbie Hummel was selected, and a 2013 second-round pick. Bojan Dubljic was selected. I hope I am not butchering names, though. Kahn closed out 2011 with two free agent signings, Jose Barea and Bonzi Wells. Wells was waived less than a month later. So now we're on to 2012. The Wolves finished the strike-shortened season with a 26-40 record, a marked improvement over the previous season, even with the adjusted schedule. Adelman's presence had much to do with the positive trajectory, as the Wolves still finished in the top 10 in points scored per game while also improving their defensive play slightly to 25th in the league. They were 4th in the league in pace and a middle of the pack 104.3 offensive rating. In June, Kahn traded a 2012 first round pick, the aforementioned Terrence Jones, to the Houston Rockets for Chase Budinger and Lior Elihu. Having no draft pick in the 2012 draft due to a trade made in 2005, shout out to Marco Jaric and Lionel Chambers, the Wolves actually had a relatively uneventful draft night. The Wolves did have a second round pick though, and with it, I already mentioned they drafted Purdue's Robbie Hummel, a solid but often injured small forward. July 2012 was a very busy month for Kahn, and he started with the move that should have happened long ago. On July 12th, Kahn waived Darko Milicic, confirming what we all knew. That signing was a major botch. The next day, Kahn sent Brad Miller, a 2013 second round draft pick, Lorenzo Brown was later selected, and a 2016 second rounder, Rade Zegara, was selected, to the New Orleans Hornets for a 2017 second rounder that was top 55 protected and did not convey. On that same day, in an unrelated transaction, the Wolves waived the often injured Martell Webster. Later that month, Kahn traded Wayne Ellington straight up to the Memphis Grizzlies for Dante Cunningham. Then came the massive trade that Kahn seemed to love. As part of a 3-team trade, Minnesota sent Wesley Johnson, a 2016 second rounder, the aforementioned Rade Zegara was selected, and a 2017 second rounder, a 2016 second rounder and 2017 second rounder, Semi Ojeleye, was selected to the Phoenix Suns. In return, the Wolves received a 2013 second rounder, the aforementioned Lorenzo Brown, and the same second rounder they had just shipped to Phoenix, the return of Rade Zegara from New Orleans. The Wolves also received a 2014 second rounder in addition, which was Johnny O'Brien, who was later selected from Phoenix. So this trade concluded the Minnesota portion of Wesley Johnson's career. Johnson had a very poor 2 seasons for the Timberwolves, especially for someone drafted so high. He never developed any advanced passing skills or moves off the dribble, and thus reduced him to a shooting specialist who was subpar at shooting, which is kind of the worst when you really think about it. Johnson finishes Wolves' tenure with averages of 7.7 points, 2.4 rebounds, and 1.4 assists per game. In his 2 seasons with Minnesota, he failed to average as much as 10 points a game and a 0.4 VORP. That, and the fact that Kahn had to package Johnson with 2 picks just to get rid of him, should tell you all you need to know about the Wesley Johnson experience in Minnesota. So now the following are the plethora of free agent signings that Kahn made during the 2012-2013 offseason. Alexei Shved, Andrei Karolinko, Brandon Roy, fresh out of retirement because of his degenerative knee concerns, Greg Stiesma, Lou Amundsen, Will Conroy, Jermaine Taylor, Mike Harris, and Chris Johnson, along with Josh Howard, all signed. Conroy, Taylor, Harris, Johnson, and Howard were all later waived. In an interesting twist, the Wolves re-signed the previously traded Lazar Hayward on the last day of the year. He played 4 more games and was waived a little over a week later. One last bit of business occurred during the 2012 season, and it wasn't a particularly small piece of business. 23-year-old Kevin Love, fresh off of averaging 24 points and 14 rebounds per game, signed a 4-year extension that included an opt-out after the third. This was not Love's desired option, as he preferred the full 5-year extension, committing himself as the face of the franchise. For reasons never clearly disclosed, Kahn pushed for a shorter deal. This would have larger ramifications later for the Wolves, long after Kahn had departed. 2013. David Kahn made just 4 more moves in 2013, signing both Mikel Galabelli and the previous waived Chris Johnson to 2 10-day contracts each before moving to sign them for the rest of the season. He also waived both Lou Amundsen as well as Brandon Roy, who only played 6 games before his knees betrayed him again, this time for good. Kahn was relieved of his duties on May 2nd, 2013, as the Timberwolves decided not to exercise their option on his contract. In the wake of his departure, Kahn still felt that he had left the Timberwolves in a better position to contend for a championship, which left everyone very much befuddled. The Wolves would go on to finish 31-51. Kahn made many signings and trades and promises during his tenure, only to end well short of the playoffs. The championship aspirations that Kahn spoke of were never close to being approached. In closing a 2010 letter to fans, Kahn thanked the fans for their patience. NBA fans as a whole, and Wolves fans in particular, had to be long-suffering, and even now must continue to exhibit that quality with every Curry 3 or Cousins dunk. Even after all these years, one can't help but relive the wrath of Kahn. I gotta run through the final records of the Timberwolves in each year of Kahn's tenure. Just one more time for the roll. One more time for my LA folks. 2010, Wolves finished 15-67. 2011, Wolves finished 17-65. 2012, Wolves finished 26-40. And 2013, the Wolves finished 31-51. If there is any silver lining, the Wolves did improve their win total each year. And to still finish well short of even sniffing the playoffs, I think is the biggest thing, or biggest mark, if you will, of David Kahn's legacy as a whole. All right, y'all, that was a lot. Hope I broke that down pretty entertainingly, hopefully clearly, because some of those names I totally think I butchered, and I feel really bad about that. But I hope I did my best. I didn't hope I did my best. I did my best, y'all. I did my best, y'all. I just hope it was a good, interesting piece, and that you walk away with this learning a little bit more about David Kahn, for those who didn't, and just how interesting of a person he was. I tell you, please go on YouTube, look up David Kahn interviews. He gives some of the most literally entertaining interviews. I've never seen someone so just on a different wavelength of where his team and where the talent that he has is in relation to what literally anyone else sees. It is so jarring and so different that it's fun to watch and look back on. So make sure you do that. All right, so I'll be back with y'all real soon. Did not forget the NBA time machine. I just had to come with some news, and I thought this was an interesting piece of just entertainment, a little bit of content I like to share with y'all. So I had to get that done. Still got stuff going on. We're all kind of in that wait and see process. We're all just here, like I said, waiting to see what happens. So definitely stay cool. Keep your hands clean. Maintain the social distancing even as things start to open up. Let's not get too crazy and get in the same situation 3 months down the line. Let's do our best. I mean, that's all we can do. But until then, y'all, this is Corbin Ford. You can follow me at Corbin NBA. This has been NBA Today, a Hoopball presentation. Again, make sure you follow Hoopball at Hoopball Tweets and hoop-ball.com. Check it out. Please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. That would be just greatly appreciated. And take care, all right? All right, y'all.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.